Hi, I'm Joe and welcome to the channel and welcome to a new series I'm doing, a deep dive on the major scale. Lots of times the pentatonic scale gets all the glory, but there's some great sounds to be found in the major scale. But one of the first steps we need to do is just to listen. And I'm guilty of this. I'll learn a new scale and I'm just start playing it up and down a chord progression and I'm not even listening to how each note sounds over any given chord that's underneath it. And so that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take a very, very common chord progression. The 1 major, going to the 5 major, going to the 6 minor, going to the 4 major. And we're going to play the major scale and we're going to listen to how each note reacts to each of those chords. And I think what you're going to find is very interesting. The flavor or the characteristic of that note is going to change depending on the chord that's underneath it. If you're not familiar with that chord progression, I'll share also how I came up with that chord progression in this. And I'm also going to share a cheat code. And that's going to be taking your box 1 minor pentatonic scale and converting it to a major scale. So if you're not familiar with how to play a major scale, I'm going to show you how you can get there from using your box 1 position. Let's go ahead and grab a guitar and let's get started on this whole entire new series. So first things first, where are we getting these chords from that we're playing over? Well, every chord can be built from a major scale. How convenient, that's exactly the topic of this series. So every time you have a scale degree in the major scale, you could build a chord off of it. So when I was yelling out the 1, 5 major, 6 minor, 4 major, what I was referring to was the scale degrees in D major. Now I made a whole video on understanding the formula for a major scale, and I'll put one of those cards up there, but let me just quickly recap it for you. The formula will always be whole step, half step, whole step, half step, to build the major scale. Well, that sounds a little funny, but let's start on D, right? So D, we need to go a whole step, which is 2 frets away. And that's our 2nd degree now. And I said another whole step. Then I said half step. Then I said whole step, whole step, whole step, and then half step. So when we look at these notes, what do we have? We have D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. Now we have the major scale. And again, off of those degrees, I can build chords. So when I said the 1 chord, I mean D major. When I say the 4 chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, it happens to be G. When I say the 5 chord, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm saying it's the A chord. And when I say the 6 minor chord, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's B. B minor. So the order though was this: 1, D, 5, A major, 6 minor, B minor, to 4, G. And now we know where this chord progression is coming from. So the next step is to play the major scale, and we already did that off of 1 string. Now that you know the formula, that's great. But let's try to play it in position. And let's say you don't really know what the major scale is, or you don't know where to start. Well, here's always a good thing to do. Everyone knows the pentatonic box 1, right? Everyone's favorite box. Well, to find that in the scale that you're in, always start with your first finger on the 6th degree of the scale. And what did we say that was? That was D, E, F sharp, G, A, B. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, B. So here's the B right here. And now we can play our B minor pentatonic. And we're already in the key that we're playing in. But I said this was D major. Well, we do know if we take that minor box and we start with our pinky, we get the major pentatonic, the relative major pentatonic. That famous Motown sound that everyone loves to hear. And all I did was I used that same scale shape, but I'm starting with my pinky. And then starts over. So now we're already zoned in on the major tonality that we need to build the major scale. And what did I discuss in the beginning? I talked about the formula. We know it's whole step, half step, can't even say it. Let me start over. Whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Well, let's start here and let's build that scale now. With the major pentatonic scale, you already have 5 of the 7 notes that you need to create the major scale. So it's not that difficult. We're just adding 2 notes. So let's notice first of all what scale degrees are actually in the D major pentatonic. So we have 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. Well, we noticed that we skipped over the 4th degree and we don't have a 7th degree. So that's all we need to add. And with all of those degrees, anywhere between the 3rd and the 4th degree and the 7th to the octave, the 8th degree, it's always going to be that half step that I talked about in the formula. So how do we do that? Well, let's walk up. 1, 2, 3. Now we need a half step. Oh, we have a G now. 5, 6. We need 7 half step to get to the root. So we have a C sharp. So all we have to do is add this G and the C sharp to the scale, and we have D major. And it starts over. Half step, that new half step. So right here, now we have 2 complete octaves just in this position alone of this scale. That's 1 octave. That's 2 octaves. And just don't get intimidated sometimes when you see these larger shapes. What I like to do is kind of break them into 2 halves. Those 2 octave halves. I kind of view that as 1 scale, and then I add on this one. Because after all, we only really have 7 notes in the scale. When you play it this way, obviously you have more than that. So that's how you can basically find the major scale in any key. And what's great about this is a movable shape. So no matter where I put this, if I want to play C major, no matter where I put my pinky to start, that's the key that I'm in. It's really that simple. Okay, so now we know where that chord progression came from, and we know how to find the major scale. Now let's do our job. This is the main purpose of the video. Let's listen to how each note sounds over the chord progression. And in this video, we're just going to focus on the 1 chord. But before I do that, let me play you the entire progression so you can hear it. 1, 5, 6 minor, 4. And it's going to loop. This is a great ear training exercise to learn this progression. When you finally get it in your ears, when you hear it on the radio, you'll know right away, oh my gosh, that's that song or that's that song. This will really help you really fine-tune your ear training. So now we have that track in our head. Let's go ahead and isolate and solo just the 1 chord, and then we're going to play the major scale over it. So now I'm just going to loop that 1 chord, and it plays for 4 beats, but we're going to just play through the major scale, and we'll stop at each note. And I'm going to start here on this part of the scale, on that 2nd octave of it. So here's the 1 chord. So here's root, 2nd degree, 3rd degree, 4th degree, 5th degree, 6th degree, 7th, and the octave. Now play it without talking this time so you can hear how the notes sound. Now I hope just by listening you can hear how certain notes on the chord kind of rub a little bit, causes a little tension. And that's because when we do this, we have active and inactive tones that we're activating during the scale. And some want to lead to other things. Well, always the strongest notes that you're probably going to hear in this are always going to be the root, the third, and the fifth. Why? Because that's in the chord that's underneath you. That's what makes up the major chord, is the root, the third, and the fifth. That's the formula now for a major chord. So now you know what that is. So let me just play those three notes, and you can hear how they just fit really nice over the chord. That's the root, third, fifth. Third, root. Well, let's talk about the other degrees now. What did you all think of the second degree, which is an E? Kind of rubs a little bit. It's not terribly unpleasant, but it's not as strong as the root. And it doesn't fit in like the third. See, it kind of resolves. So that second degree, you may not want to land on that. It's not a bad note. That's technically a ninth or a second that you're adding, and you've heard that chord before. But since we're not playing that in this progression, we're just playing strictly a D major, it kind of rubs slightly. It causes a little bit of tension. Well, we already covered the third. Let's hear what the fourth sounds like, which will be G. Well, it's not as solid as the third. It's not bad though. It's not as strong as the fifth. What's happening there? Well, that's a suspended. We've all played that chord. That chord, that note I should say, always wants to resolve most likely to the third. So let me just play that resolution. So it's not necessarily a bad note, but it wants to resolve itself. See, I'm resolving out of the fifth. Resolving down the third. So it's not a bad note necessarily, but it does want to move someplace. It wants to go down or up to the fifth. Down to the third or up to the fifth. Now let's look at, well, we've already done the fifth, so let's go ahead and do the sixth, which would be B. Let's hear what that sounds like over this D. To me, that one has a lot of tension. It wants to do something. So let's see if it's as strong as the seventh. No? Seventh is a little worse. 6 to 7. Let's try the 6 going to the 5th. That sounds more at home, right? So to me, that 6 kind of creates some more tension. None of these are bad or wrong notes. It's just what you do with them. But you have to understand what they sound like. And this is, again, only over the 1 chord. I think what you're going to find when we play the 6 minor, it's going to sound just fine when we get to that video because that'll be the root. But in this case here, it's the 6 on top of that D. Just by hitting that open string and hitting that, I can hear there's tension. And we already just found out when I do the 7th, there's tension there, and that kind of wants to resolve to the root. So we can hear that the 6th and the 7th degree really kind of want to resolve or go someplace else when it's over the 1 chord. So here's what I would like to encourage you to do. I'm going to put this track in the description down below. Feel free to download it and see if you can bring it maybe into your DAW and just loop over the one chord and just get familiar with playing each note. And when you've come to a note that you find has some tension, try to resolve it. This is what will help you when you go to kind of create your own melodies or your own solos. You'll know now, hey, the stronger notes for this one chord will probably be the root, the third, or the fifth. And if I land on like a fourth, I want to go down to the third. It'll teach you those kind of movements inside of the chords or inside of the melody that you're creating that will resolve itself naturally to the chord underneath it. Well, that's the first video down in this series. In the next video, we're going to take a look at the major scale over the 5 major chord. If you haven't done so already, would you do me a favor and consider helping me grow the channel by subscribing down below, hit the like button, and of course knock on the bell and you'll be notified when that video comes out. All these things really do help me out and I'm so grateful for your support. As always, I wish you a great day.